Hi everyone, this is Kathy from courtchatter.com and welcome to Court Chatter Live. This is a weekly broadcast that we will be doing discussing all the cases and the trials and things that we're following on Court Chatter. Either we're watching them or we're following them closely, and I thought it would be a good idea to do a weekly show kind of wrapping up the week of what all of us have been watching and following. This will come up on YouTube, and there will be a chat box off to the side of the screen, and you guys will be able to live chat, which will also, you can interact with me, and so I can read your comments on the air if you have any questions about the cases. This will be interactive, so I think that'll be good. We'll have guests on from time to time. So it takes a minute for you guys to get in because it's a little delayed. I'm going to pull it up. You're going to see me looking back and forth a lot because I've got a couple of screens going with different things on it. So let me pull up the broadcast now so I can see you guys. Okay. All right, I'm going to give it just a few more minutes. Like I said, my live broadcast is a little bit delayed for what you guys are seeing on YouTube, and I want to make sure everybody gets in here okay. I also want to be able to interact with you. You can let me know how my sound is, louder, softer, if we have any feedback, which I don't think we should. So I'm going to give you guys just a few more minutes to get in. Oh, I see people coming in now. So as you're coming in, say hi in the chat room that you see over to the right hand side. For those of you that'll be watching this later, because we're going to archive all of the shows, you won't see this live interaction chat box. You'll have the comment section that's below every video on YouTube, and you can just comment there, and I'll check that from time to time. Okay, so let me just find out who we have here in the chat room. Oh, there we go. People are starting to show up now. Okay. There we go. Okay. I see Addie. So Addie, a lot of you will know, is one of my moderators and she's the producer of this show, and she is in charge of all the archiving for Court Chatter. And so if you participate in our chat room on courtchatter.com, you'll know who Addie is, and I can see her now. She is signed into the chat room. And I see Susan. Okay. All right, now we're getting there. Let me know as we go how my volume is and everything, if everything's okay with that. Okay, so I thought we'll just wrap up what's been going on for the past week or so. And let's start with Derek Medina. So Derek Medina, and AKA Facebook Killer, we watched his trial a couple of months ago. He's in Florida. He's called the Facebook Killer, kind of dubbed that name, because he killed his wife, then took a picture with his cell phone of her lifeless body, posted it on his Facebook page, and he said, and I will read it, with the post of her body, "I'm going to prison or death sentence for killing my wife. Love you guys, miss you guys, take care, Facebook people. You will see me in the news. My wife was punching me, and I am not going to stand anymore with the abuse, so I did what I did. I hope you understand me." Posted that on his Facebook. And then all of a sudden you would see comments underneath it when his Facebook friends started seeing that. What is this? Is this a joke? And of course, that's since been taken down. If you really have the need to see that post, you can Google it, and it's out there in images. Oh, I see Jan came in too. Okay. So he had his trial. He was charged with first-degree murder. And the reason prosecutors went with first-degree murder, luckily, like we don't never see this when it's inside someone's home, but inside their apartment, they had a surveillance camera up in the corner of their apartment inside. So we see part of what was going on when she was killed. We don't see the actual murder because it's off screen in the kitchen, but we can see her like coming in and out of the kitchen. She's talking on the cell phone for a while. Then you see him come from the upstairs down into the kitchen. Then you see him leave the kitchen. Then he comes back, and this is where prosecutors say he left and got a gun and came back, and that makes it premeditated. And kills her. Now, his story he first gives to the police was she had a knife. We were arguing. She got a knife. I was able to get the knife away from her and put it back in the drawer, but then she started punching me and I shot her. But then by the time they get to court, it changed, and the defense was that she still had the knife, and there was a lot of back and forth about in this surveillance camera, can you see a reflection off of this sink? Can you see a knife in her hand? And of course, you really couldn't see anything like that. And then they tried to say that it was a knife handle. So that's why they charged him with first-degree murder, because they were fighting all morning. And we also know that they were because she had been texting her friend just saying that he had not woken her up when she wanted him to, and they were supposed to watch a movie together, and he never wants to spend time with her. So that fight escalated that morning, and she ended up dead. The jury, however, did not find him guilty of first-degree murder. They found him guilty of second-degree murder. So they didn't buy the premeditation, I guess, or sometimes in these cases, it's a compromise the jury comes to in the jury room. So we don't really know why they came back with second degree. They may believe that she had a knife at one time. They may believe that they were fighting and it happened kind of like that in the heat of heated passion. So his sentencing was last Friday. By the way, the trial and the sentencing, everything to do with his case, you can find in our archives on our YouTube channel, Court Chatter View. So he was sentenced to, the judge sentenced him to the maximum for the second degree murder, which is life, but with the possibility of parole after 25 years. So that's what happened with Derek Medina. I will see if anybody has any questions about that case. If not, we will just move on to the next case. Okay, great. I see a lot more people in now. Okay. So let's move to more recently. We just had James VanCallis, and we watched that trial out of Michigan. And he was accused of murdering 14-year-old April Millsap while she was walking her dog on the popular trail they had there in that town. Prosecutors say he was on his motorcycle and he came upon her on that path. Their theory is he was going to rape her, sexually assault her, and got interrupted somehow because her body was found beaten and her head was stomped on multiple times. She was badly beaten, but her shirt and bra were off and her pants were pulled down. But there was no evidence that a sexual assault occurred, and that's why they think that was his plan, but somehow got interrupted. So this case was very interesting for me. I like to have the state prove their case to me. That's how I like to go into trials. Now, sometimes I know a lot about the case going in, a lot more than a juror does, so it's not always easy to go in completely with an open mind. In this case, I did go in with an open mind. All of the evidence against him was circumstantial, so they had no DNA, they had no fingerprints, they had nothing at all that tied him to her, nothing. But they had strong circumstantial evidence. So it was a very interesting case to watch. It brought to light what technology is now in our courtrooms and what technology does for cases. So when April was walking her dog, she had a fitness app on her phone. And so that, it tracks your steps you take, and you guys all know about those fitness trackers. She had that going when she was walking Penny, her dog. And they were able, because of that, they were able to get that. It's the GPS that allows that app to happen. They were able to follow all her steps. So they knew exactly, at least knew exactly where her phone went, which was with her. So they were able to know exactly what her path was that she took. Then James VanCallis had his cell phone, and he used it a few times and it pinged off of certain towers, and they were able to connect his phone really close to her phone and sort of the same path. Then after she's murdered, her phone moves because the killer takes it, and then it starts moving very fast, because one thing with the fitness app is it tracks how fast you're walking or running or jogging. Well, it starts moving really fast, and they say that's because James VanCallis left on his motorcycle. Then they were able to show someone's house in a neighborhood had an outside surveillance camera. And they showed a man going by on a motorcycle at the same time. Her phone, that's her phone. Basically, they could say that person on that motorcycle had April's phone. Now, you couldn't say it was exactly James VanCallis, but it sure looked like his motorcycle that they knew he had. And they were able to show many similarities between, because it wasn't this spot-on picture. It was kind of from a distance, but so they had that. They also had his ex-girlfriend that testified, and she was pretty powerful. Some people didn't think she was believable. I thought that she embellished some, but was credible about what she said about him that night. She said that in the middle of the night, she woke up to him cleaning the bottom of his sneakers with hand sanitizer. Now, we saw a lot of pictures from this house over the trial, and they were hoarders. They were, I'll just say, slobs. That house was filthy, but he was cleaning his sneakers in the middle of the night. Now, when police come to question him, he tells them what he was wearing that day, and he says they were these certain K-Swiss sneakers, and he gives them to him. But then his girlfriend says, no, they were these Nike Jordans that he always wore, and that's what he had on, and that's what he was cleaning. Well, those Nike Jordans have never been found, so they couldn't find the shoes, and that's important because they were able to get shoe prints from the scene and on April herself, unfortunately, because he stomped her over and over again. But they didn't have the actual shoes, so what they did is he himself had pictures of himself on his phone and videos, and in one of the videos it pans down briefly and you can see him wearing these shoes. You also see another picture on his Facebook where he has these shoes on. So they got that exact brand and model of shoe from Nike and did test patterns on it to test it against the scene. And the expert couldn't say 100%, but he did say, yes, this is consistent with this shoe. So that was the case of the missing shoes. He also had a hoodie that he wore all the time, and his brother testified that he wore that hoodie all the time, and his girlfriend said he always had it in his backpack and he always put it on when he rode his motorcycle. Well, that hoodie was never found either. So there was a lot of circumstantial evidence in this case. He also had some phone calls that night to his brother. I'm trying to think of what else they had on him. So I would say the best evidence for me in that case was tracking her phone and his phone. The drive-by of the showed him in the camera driving the neighborhood the same time they were tracking April's phone, and the girlfriend's testimony. Now, she said, he was extremely controlling, extremely abusive. She went on and on about him, but they never really bring anybody in to say that she had ever complained about that before. She'd never reported him before. So I thought she had a little bit where she may have been embellishing, but she was credible for the most part. So I'm going to read some comments from you guys right now before we get to the verdict on that. I'm going to read some comments. And Allie the Cat says, decades before DNA existed and before technology was so great, many cases were prosecuted and found guilty. So circumstantial evidence is still powerful. And I agree with that. I do agree with that. I think that we live in a day and age now where we want to see more than circumstantial, and some juries want to see more than that because they know that there's an existence, that we have all this technology. But we see guilty verdicts all the time in circumstantial only cases. Okay, so the jury came back and they've only deliberated about 6 hours. And they came back with guilty of first-degree murder, guilty of kidnapping, guilty of attempted sexual assault. Every count they found him guilty on. The jury foreman did a brief interview with one of the local media stations after, and he said that the first time they took a vote, all 12 of them voted guilty. So it seems like there was never even much to discuss in that jury room. And I did find that surprising. I thought with it only being circumstantial, somebody would want to talk it out. So I have a message out to that jury foreman. He's being contacted on my behalf, and we're going to see if we can get him on the show next week or the week after, and then we could really get into what was going on in that jury room. Okay, Adele says, yes, the old preponderance of the evidence theory. Well done, justice served. So he hasn't been sentenced yet. His sentencing is, I have it over here, March 30th. So March 30th at 8:30 a.m. I'm assuming that'll be live streamed and we can watch it. However, it's a mandatory life in prison without parole for what he was found guilty of first-degree murder and first-degree felony murder. They can charge him with both of those, even though it's only one murder, because he committed a murder while in the act of a felony, which they say was the kidnapping, detaining her against her will, and the sexual assault, attempted sexual assault. Okay, so that is it for James VanCallis. I will look really quick to see if you guys have any questions or comments about that. Madison has something I'd like to talk about. She says, I believe the eyewitnesses. That's right. This was a critical part of the case that I didn't particularly like myself, but I don't like eyewitness testimony. That's just my thing. I just think it's highly unreliable. Now, if you can partner it up with other evidence, then it becomes a lot better. So, but they did have eyewitnesses that saw April on the trail that day with a man on a motorcycle. And 2 of them positively ID'd the man as James VanCallis. Now, the man on the motorcycle was wearing his helmet the whole time, the motorcycle helmet. But they say his eyes. They say that it's his eyes. As a matter of fact, I'm going to see if I can pull up a picture really quick of VanCallis. Let me see if I can get this to work. Let's see. Okay. Oh, there you go. You guys can see that. And I probably could have picked a better one of his eyes, but he does have very distinct eyes. And I don't know, I kind of describe him as bug eyes. And all the witnesses said that it was his eyes. They ID'd him by his eyes. Now, shortly after, let me see if I can get this picture off of here now. Maybe. Okay. Shortly after the murder, James VanCallis and his father, which, by the way, they all lived in this house. It was a huge house, but it was disgustingly filthy inside. They all, he lived there with his father, had one part of the house. His mother and her boyfriend had another part. And then he was there with his girlfriend, and they have a child together, and she had an older child. So the cops had tracked him. They had driven by, actually, and seen the motorcycle in the driveway. That's how they got linked onto him. So that all led to them busting them. They had a marijuana growing operation at that house. So him and his father were arrested about 6 days after the murder. And that was on the local news, and his mugshot was on the local news. And that's when the eyewitnesses started to call in, and they said that was him, that was him. So that's how they got the eyewitnesses involved. Some people thought the eyewitnesses were very credible, and I do think a couple of them were, and I'm not saying that any of them were lying anyway. It's just eyewitness testimony is difficult. They did have a lot of inconsistencies, and one of them did a composite with a sketch artist, and some people think that looks like him. I don't think it looks anything like him. Anyway, the eyewitness, oh yeah, so Matthew's on here and he says those creepy eyes, ooh, yeah, and he does have some creepy eyes. I probably should have got a better picture. So he's guilty. He's guilty of killing a 14-year-old girl who was beautiful, and I am very sorry to her family and to her mother. She was just out walking her dog and didn't know him. Okay, that's James VanCallis. Let's move on to Michelle Anderson. I'll come back and look at chat and see if you guys have questions about the previous cases. Oh, okay. Adele says that she believed the eyewitnesses were great, and that I think her name was Mary Stein, one of the witnesses, was right on, and that they had brought up red tint in his hair, and you could see a little red tint in his hair in one of his pictures. Okay. All right. Let's move on to, let's see, Madison says one eyewitness said the eyes in the composite looked like him and not anything else. Well, that's true. So one of the eyewitnesses said, well, the composite that was done by another eyewitness doesn't look like him, but the eyes are the same. So really it was his eyes. Oh, one thing I want to mention about this case that we really never see is the defense, not the state, the defense had James VanCallis put his motorcycle helmet on in the courtroom. So he had to be unshackled, and then the jury was brought back in, and then he stood in front of one of the eyewitnesses, and he had him put on his motorcycle helmet with the visor down. Then the eyewitness was like, well, he was at a different level, and because I was on my bike riding and he was standing, and so then they would have him like crouch down. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. You never see a defendant make moves like that. Now, we all kind of know the Jodi Arias case and her famous linebacker lunge, but really you don't see that very often. And I think that backfired on him, because the eyewitness was like, yep, that's what he looked like. Yep, that looks like him in the helmet. So I think that was a bad idea. Okay, let's move on to Michelle Anderson, also known as the Carnation murders. This is up in the state of Washington. This is such a horrible case. It's a horrible case. Michelle Anderson and her boyfriend, Joseph McEnroe, are accused of murdering Michelle's mother, father, her brother, her sister-in-law, her niece, and her nephew. And the niece and nephew were only 3 years old and 6 years old. Joseph McEnroe, the boyfriend, had his trial last year, and we didn't watch the trial. It wasn't live streamed, but the sentencing phase was, so we got to see that. And they were going for the death penalty for him, but the jury found him guilty of first-degree murder, and then they go into a penalty phase. The same jury then has to decide life or death, and they just couldn't give him death. So he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, and that was last year. Now her trial comes up. It was on Christmas Eve in 2007. She and her boyfriend Joe go to her parents' house. Now they're living on a trailer on the property. It's a lot of property, and it's in a kind of a rural place in Washington. And they go to her parents' house Christmas Eve day afternoon. And, you know, depending on what story you believe about what happened, what prosecutors say happened was Michelle was angry that her parents wanted to start charging them rent to live in that trailer. She was mad about that. And she claims, and we've listened to her police interview now, she claims that her brother owed her $40,000. Now, that's a lot of money, and I don't think she has any way of having that kind of money. But apparently she was angry that her brother owed her money and that her parents were asking her to start paying rent. So she had gone there that day. Now she tells police that she went there that day to talk to her parents and to get them to side with her on getting the money from the brother. But they wouldn't. They only backed him, and everybody's always against her, and nobody's ever on her side. And then she says in her police interview, and so I just freaked out, and I went back out to the truck and got a gun. So the horrifying details of this case just leaves you shaking your head about what's going on and how a daughter can be involved in that. So her mom and dad are the only ones home at this point, and her brother and his family are going to be coming over for Christmas Eve. So they kill her mother and father, and she says she shot her father but the gun jammed and he wasn't dead. And Joe came and got the gun from her and tried to unjam it. And then he just went ahead and shot the dad a few more times to make sure he was dead. And that then she killed her mother, who was in the kitchen. She was wrapping presents. They dragged their bodies out back and they put the mom inside a shed. And when asked in her police interview why both bodies weren't in the shed, she said her dad was too heavy. So, or he wouldn't fit in there. So they left him outside the shed on the grass and put an old piece of carpeting over him, a rug over him. And then they lay in wait for her brother and his family to show up. Then they come over and she says, they come in, and when they ask where mom and dad are, she says, oh, they're in the bathroom. But then immediately she claims she starts fighting with Scott, her brother, and he comes at her. Now, I don't think the evidence really shows that's what happened, but they shoot and kill Scott. Then Erica, the wife, starts pleading with them, don't do this, don't do this. And she's got her 2 little kids there. And they shoot Erica, but the gun jams again. And she's not dead. And she manages to crawl over to a phone and she dials 911. And we hear that 911 call. By the way, that's on courtchatter.com too, if you want to go listen to that. She never actually says anything, but you hear screaming in the background that Erica's mother has testified in this trial that is her daughter's voice. And she's screaming, no, not the kids, or please, no, not the kids. Horrifying, horrifying. And then the line goes dead. Well, the dispatcher calls back because that's 911 protocol to call back when you get a hang up, and no one answers. So they dispatch a car out there. The police get there and there's a gated fence and it's locked. And then the property's way back. You can't see it from the fence area. It's way back. And so it's locked and they don't know whether to go in or not. And then they said they kind of walked around and they didn't see anything happening. They talked to a couple of neighbors and they left. So right after Erica tries to call 911, then they shoot her again and multiple times. And another horrifying part of the story is her little son, she is huddled over him, protecting him. Because what the forensics shows is a bullet went through her and into him. So she's huddled over trying to protect her children, and they just kill them. And when asked why kill the kids, Michelle Anderson has different, she says, oh, I didn't want them to have to live with what they had seen, like doing them a favor. But, really she just didn't want any witnesses is what I'm thinking. So now you wonder, why are we having a trial when Michelle Anderson has told all of this to the police? Well, we're all wondering that. This case was in 2007, and it has taken 8 years to get here. Well, 7 years, I guess it was Christmas Eve. This case has had so many twists and turns in it. Her competency, for one. So the judge ordered a competency evaluation, and then she was put in the hospital, and then that went back and forth for a long time. She's tried to fire attorneys over and over again. The state went for the death penalty on her and Joseph. And then the defense said that they didn't file that intent to seek the death penalty properly. So then they appealed it. And then a judge said, oh, you cannot go for the death penalty. So then the state appealed that to a higher court. And then a higher court ruled, yes, you can charge the death penalty. So that all of this is going on all of these years. And so that's how it's just been delay after delay after delay. Now, Michelle Anderson's attorneys still say to this day, and they said it right before the trial started a couple weeks ago, that their client is not competent, that she will not aid in her defense, that she refuses to talk to them, and she will have no communication with them. I read some earlier motions from a couple of years ago. Actually, one was just a year ago, that because she's been kept pretty much in solitary in the jail, and she's not talking to anybody, and she won't meet with her attorneys, and she won't have anything to do with this trial at all. So the attorneys had actually filed a motion asking if she could not be so solitary, that she could have interaction with other inmates and have a TV to watch. They thought maybe the stimulation will kind of bring her out of whatever funk she's in. The state psychiatrist found her competent to stand trial. So here we are. By the way, that motion was denied to get her to hang out with other people and all that. So we're at trial and we're waiting for the defense opening statement. Like, what's the defense? What are they going to say? And they deferred their opening statement. And that means that they chose not to give an opening statement until the beginning of their case, until the state has rested. So we still don't know. We still don't know what they're going to say. I'm sure they'll try and bring up mental health issues, but as far as I know, she's only, she might have a little depression, but I don't think there's anything serious there. No one knows. I talked to a local reporter there that's been covering the case from day one, and she said, that's what we're all waiting to hear. We're all waiting to hear why this is at trial. Now, I will say, after Joseph McEnroe, after that jury failed to give him the death penalty, there was also a case back-to-back at the same time in the same county. Christopher, I think his first name is Christopher Monfort. He killed a police officer up there, and the state was going for the death penalty there, and the jury didn't give him the death penalty, and he's a cop killer. So those two were back to back at the same time. So after those two juries failed to hand out the death penalty, the prosecutor dropped the death penalty on Michelle Anderson. So they are not going for that in this trial. So the most she can get is life. I don't know why she hasn't pled guilty. So we'll see what they're going to go for on that. It's so horrific. They played her interrogation with the police, and she just sounds like, she sounds upset, like she's crying, but you don't really know if she's crying. And she says a lot of times in that, oh, you're going to think I'm stupid. Oh, now you think I'm stupid. She says that a lot. Like maybe she doesn't have a high intelligence, and that's been her whole life. I kind of got that feeling when she would say that over, and she was really worried about not looking smart. We have the archives of that on our YouTube channel, and then we also have a transcript of her police interview and Joseph McEnroe's, where they both just confessed. From day one, they both confessed. It's really, the state of Washington has spent, I think we're at $8 million, something like that, trying these two. And yet they both confessed in the beginning. So that case, unfortunately, it's not live streaming every day. The local media there just doesn't have the resources to commit to this day in and day out. So they just streamed what they deem are key witnesses. So we're following it. Now, Paul Sanders, a friend of mine, and he was a juror in a case in Arizona, the Marissa DeVault case. And after he was on that jury, he then attended every day of the Jodi Arias retrial down there. So he wrote a book about the Marissa DeVault case, and he wrote a book about Jodi Arias. And he's now moved to Washington, and he's attending every day of this trial. And he's writing us daily recaps. So that's very detailed recaps. You can find those on courtchatter.com. You can find them on Paul Sanders' Facebook page. He's also on Twitter at the 13th Juror MD. We have detailed recaps every day. So that's pretty much now how we're following the Michelle Anderson trial. It's horrifying. I don't know how a jury's not going to find her guilty. I don't know what you guys think about that. Let me go through the chat room and see. Let's see if we have any questions about everything. Oh, they're talking about a lady. Okay, at the Michelle Anderson trial, there is a lady that keeps coming to watch the trial. And she says that I'm an attorney pro se, and I'm an advocate for Michelle Anderson, except the defense says, we don't know her, and she's not part of us, but she stands up and interrupts the proceedings, and she's done it a couple of times now. Susan in the chat room says the judge gave her one last warning. If she has an outburst again, she's going to jail. She tried to tell the judge that she has a disability where she shouts out, and that he's not providing her with a disability advocate in the courtroom. And this is just a observer. However, I think the state said a couple of days ago that she visited Michelle Anderson in jail, or tried to visit her in jail. So there's some crazy stuff going on in that courtroom. Allie the cat says, yes, Susan, couldn't believe what I read today. Interruptive disorder. That's right. She told the judge she has what's called interruptive disorder. That I shouldn't laugh, because maybe that is a true diagnosis out there. But that's what she's claiming she has, and that I guess the judge shouldn't do anything about her outbursts. I have no idea. Susan says she'll likely end up in jail like that one that had the outburst in the James Holmes case. Yes, remember her? She said she was his biological mother. That was a little crazy. Okay, let's see what else you guys. Tracy likes my chair. Thank you. Okay. Oh, Paul Sanders said that woman that keeps interrupting the gallery in the Michelle Anderson trial visited her on February 9th. So 2 days ago, I guess she did visit her, which I wouldn't think she'd be allowed visitors. Well, I guess, I don't know. I don't know how it works. Okay. Adele says that'd be me. I can't shut my mouth sometimes. Okay. Yeah. Tourette's, maybe. Tony says maybe it's Tourette's. You know, could be. Either way, the judge can't have her interrupting the trial. So he's given her one final warning, and we'll see what happens with that. Okay, so that's Michelle Anderson. She's facing life in prison without the possibility of parole. I have no idea how they could give her anything else, and there's no way they're going to find her not guilty. Just briefly, we're following Travion Smith case out of North Carolina. This one I haven't been as interested in, probably because it was going the same time as James VanCallis, and we're following the Michelle Anderson trial. But he and two other people, a male and a female, were out breaking into cars one night and seeing, stealing stuff out of cars. And they were in like an apartment complex or community and going through cars. And the woman claims that then Travion Smith and his friend jumped up on a second-story balcony and went inside a woman's apartment. And that apartment was Melissa Huggins-Jones. She was there with her 8-year-old daughter, and it looks like they were both asleep. And Melissa was beaten and stabbed several times and killed. And thankfully, the 8-year-old daughter wasn't. However, they left her for her 8-year-old daughter to find her, which should actually bring on extra life sentences in my opinion. So Travion claims that he didn't go inside. He claims he was outside on the balcony, and then he did hear screaming. I think he admitted to hearing screaming from a woman, but that it was the buddy that killed her. That's what he claims. So, I've got a few more questions. I'll get to your questions here in a minute. However, they've got evidence of his shoe prints from his shoes and the shoe prints of the other guy inside the home. He also said that his friend was wearing his shoes that night. But the girl that was like kind of the lookout for them says they both came out of that apartment, and then they were both really panicked and freaked out and said, "We got to get out of here." They have some gang affiliations, because several times in court it's been brought up how this next witness only knows him by this gang name, and we can't have him say that name in court. And the judges ruled that the gang affiliation can't be brought up. So I don't know. I'll just go out on a limb. They had a couple of gangbangers going around breaking into cars thinking they can do what they want, and they end up killing a woman. But they really the partner that was with him that night, he's pled guilty, so he's admitted to doing it. So we are expecting to see him. Well, I don't think he's going to testify now. Sorry, I should have known that. He pled guilty, and then he spilled the beans. Okay, so that's how, this case for me isn't like, oh, I wonder if he's guilty or not. But, we'll see. That one's being streamed every day. So we're showing that every day on Court Chatter. That's Travion Smith. So let's see what you guys are saying in the chat room now. Oh, Allie is asking about Bob Bashara. Okay, so Bob Bashara is in Michigan, and we know him as Master Bob. Unfortunately, we know him as Master Bob. He was very into an S&M lifestyle and having women slaves, and he was the master. But his wife apparently was a perfectly lovely woman who was not into all of that, and he was doing that on the side, and he was found guilty of hiring his handyman to kill her. And the handyman, Joe Jantz, admitted to it, pled guilty, and was supposed to testify against Bashara for a lighter sentence. And then, like the day of opening statements, he goes back on that and says that he's not going to testify and that he doesn't want to plead guilty. He was already found guilty and sentenced, though, and so his case is kind of like, yeah, whatever. They went on with the trial. The jury found Bob Bashara guilty of hiring Jantz. But now there's an appeal hearing going on, what we call a post-conviction hearing. And Bob Bashara's appealing, saying he had ineffective counsel. It's the hearing that will never end, right? If you guys, for those of you guys that are following this with me, Judge Vonda Evans, who, if you don't know who she is, look her up, because she is a character in the courtroom, is what I'll say. She's a tough judge. She's a yeller. She's a screamer. She's the judge in this case. Well, they have this hearing, and then it doesn't get finished with all the witnesses they want to bring up. He has a new attorney now representing him, saying that his old attorneys didn't call witnesses that he wanted called, and didn't bring out things that he wanted to be brought out. So usually these post-conviction hearings like this, maybe are a couple of days right together. Well, this has gone a couple of days, and then she schedules them to come back in another month. And then it goes another couple of days, and she schedules them to come back in 2 months. It's like the longest thing. So today they were supposed to be back in court, but that was delayed again to March 11th. So we won't see any more of Bob Bashara, at least until March 11th, and we'll see if that gets delayed. Again, I have no idea. Okay. Let's see. What else do we have? Okay. Briefly, let's talk about Justin Ross Harris. Justin Ross Harris is the dad in Georgia that his case is also kind of coined hot car death. He's accused of murdering his toddler, Cooper Harris, by leaving him in his car seat in the hot car all day in July, I think it was in June 2014, in the hot Georgia sun, and little Cooper died that way. So we've been waiting for his trial, and he's had some pretrial hearings going on that we've been following. We also have CNN analyst Phil Holloway that's helping us follow that trial. He's attending the hearings in the courtroom, and he's doing some updates on it and some Q&As on it, and we'll probably have him on here talking about it. He has two more pretrial hearings coming up on February 22nd and 23rd. So that's 2 days that the judge is scheduled to hear final motions before trial. The judge just denied it was a kind of a big hit for the defense. He's also accused of sexting with minors, okay? And they've lumped it all into the same trial, which the defense has been arguing they want it severed and they want it in separate trials. But the state successfully, we don't know completely successful yet, to get them joined together, because he says he was sexting one of them from work while Cooper was out in the parking lot at his work dying, okay? So he has those charges too. And they wanted those charges thrown out and severed, and the judge just ruled against them last week on that. So that's a big hit for the defense. And then yesterday, Ross Harris's, by the way, we use Justin Ross Harris hashtag a lot for this, and that's his full name, but apparently he goes by Ross. So you'll hear him called Ross Harris. His wife, Leanne, people are very suspicious of her. They think that she knew what he was going to do that day or was in on it, and they both wanted Cooper gone. They think that because of some website searches and how she responded at the daycare when Cooper didn't show up that day. I guess I should backtrack and say that Ross Harris was supposed to take his son to daycare in the morning. Before work. He went and stopped at Chick-fil-A. They had breakfast there. Then he puts him back in his car, and he drives down the road, like just right down the road. And instead of turning right to the daycare, he turns left to go to work. So he claims in just that amount of time, he forgot Cooper was with him. That's what he says. He says he forgot that taking him to the daycare wasn't necessarily his normal routine, and he forgot and left him in there. So Leanne Harris acted funny in a lot of people's opinion. And she said at the jail, she said something about, I hope you haven't said too much. So people have been suspicious for her. She's never been charged with anything. And she kind of was a stand by your man kind of gal at the probable cause hearing that happened right after his arrest. But now, that was in June of 2014. Yesterday, she filed for divorce. And in the divorce papers, in the motion, it says for the marriage is irretrievably broken. You can read that. I have that filing, that divorce filing, on the site, courtchatter.com. If you push the archives button tab and on the site, all the defendants of all the cases we cover will pull up. So if you go and pull up Justin Ross Harris, you can see that divorce filing and what she has to say about that. Okay, you guys are saying, how can you forget your child? You know, I'm not saying he's innocent of this. But I do know that has happened. Unfortunately, that has happened. We all think there's no way you would ever forget your child. But it does happen. However, it doesn't look so great for him about being not guilty. I try and keep an open mind going in every trial. I also want to know how strong the state's case is. So I'll be watching and covering that case closely. Adele says guilty, in my opinion. That's what I would say. That's what the majority of people feel about this case. Yeah, Jan says, what took Harris's wife so long to file for divorce, right? I guess she was sticking it out with him, and then all of a sudden, yeah, why not now? It's interesting. Tracy says maybe she believed him, or Tracy says maybe she wants to testify against him. Well, she can always testify against him. It's just spouses can't be forced to testify. So I think she could testify regardless. Adele says, it's sitting in the van texting that chances the odds. Well, in his office, right? He was in his office sexting with, I think, a 15-year-old. And that included sharing pictures of body parts. So Madison says, do you wait till all evidence is in before deciding cases? Hey, I like to say that that's what I do. I can't do it in every case. I watch the whole case. I cover the whole case. I listen to all the evidence. There's no doubt about that. It's hard going into some cases because I know so much. Going into it, I've seen all the motions. Sometimes we've seen lengthy pretrial hearings and probable cause hearings that kind of lays out all the evidence. Also, we will see things the jury doesn't see. So we know more than a jury. So sometimes it's hard to go in completely open-minded. But my favorite thing is to argue the defense side in cases. And I know some people don't like that. But I'm here to tell you that there are some innocent people that go on trial and that are charged. It does happen, and we've seen that happen. And we have the justice system that we need to make we need to make sure beyond a reasonable doubt that someone's guilty if you're going to take their freedom away. And it is the state's job to prove the case. So I like to go into cases with that attitude. You need to prove the case to me. Lay it all out and let me see what you got. And the people in my chat room, as we're watching the trials, have seen me in the past flip-flop while I'm watching a trial. And I'll say, oh, it's just weak. Oh, their case is weak. Their case is weak. And then by the end, I'm like, oh, he's so guilty. So I do like to have an open mind. I like to listen to both sides. And I really want the state to prove the case if they're going to take somebody's freedom away. Okay. Allie says about Justin Ross Harris, problem is routine was going for breakfast, then dropping him off. They went through the drive-through. So where was the disconnect? Oh, yeah, in a hurry to sext. Well, Madison says, I don't think it's possible to save your thoughts till the end, but keep an open mind. I agree. And that's exactly what I try and do. I will say years ago, I was sort of a real believer that people aren't charged unless they're guilty, or I don't know how to put it. And that prosecutors were always the good guys and defense attorneys were not the good guys. And that way, a long time ago, I kind of fell into the category of people, and I think a lot of people have those thoughts. But now doing what I do and doing it for so long and covering these cases, look, prosecutors are not always the good guys. And some prosecutors lie, and some prosecutors are sneaky, and some prosecutors hide evidence. And we know all of that. It's about some defense attorneys. So the games are played on both sides of that courtroom. And I just never want to see anybody, if I have any doubt at all, I don't want to see their freedom taken away. I also don't want to see a killer go free. So that's why we have the justice system we do. And that's why jurors are told they need to keep an open mind and they need to hear all the evidence. And it's hard for some of us that sit on the sidelines and watch it to act like we're a juror, because like I said, we know more. We see news reports. We know that evidence that's not admissible in court. So sometimes it's hard to do that. Okay. Susan says, what was the last trial you watched with the not guilty verdict? Well, the last trial I covered with a not guilty verdict, well, this might not have been the last one. He was the guy that, with one of my favorite defense attorneys, Al Million, who is now a judge, by the way, and he was his defense attorney. And Adam somebody. He was accused of killing his wife. She was found in the bathroom. If you guys remember what his name was, pop it into chat. I really believe the state could not get to him on this. I firmly believe that. And in the end, he was found not guilty. Some people still believe that he killed his wife, but there was nothing to say. I don't remember all the details off the top of my head about that case, but she was found like she'd fallen off the toilet and was found in between the toilet and a magazine rack. And I don't know. So yes, yeah, Allie, he was a twin. I can't think of his name. Oh, Kaufman. Thank you, Ty B. Ty B said it was Adam Kaufman. And he wasn't, yeah, that's right. He was a twin. Hoagie says, it is hard to not flip-flop your opinion when each side makes a valid point. And that's exactly right. And I'm telling you, that is why I love our site and what we do there. And we show these trials and with the live chat room, because all of you guys, all of you trial watchers are like that. You'll argue just for your point and for your point and for one side, and then all of a sudden you'll be like, I don't know, I guess that was a good point by the defense, you know. And I love that. I love that. It's respectable. It's respectable debate, and I love that part about it. Oh yes, Loves says it was the spray tan defense. That's right. So look up Adam Kaufman if you want to know about that case. Okay, I think we're going to get ready to wrap up here. I just wanted to briefly mention Adnan Syed. For those of you who don't know who that is, you might have been living under a rock. The famous, now famous podcast called Serial featured his case, and Serial had a ton of followers, including myself, who walked through that case. And he was convicted of killing his ex-girlfriend, and he was still in high school, and so was she, Heyman Lee. And I'm not going to get into that whole case. So if you don't know about it, go into Serial, Serial, a podcast, watch that season. And after that, watch the Undisclosed podcast, because that is done by an attorney who knew Adnan and his family and still knows them. So needless to say, he's been in jail for many, many years, and now he might be getting a new trial. So his post-conviction relief hearing just wrapped up. It was 3 days last week and Monday of this week. The defense has some really, really good points, and I think it's highly likely he'll get a new trial. I won't get into any more of that, so just look up the case if you don't know it. And if we don't have any more questions, I think I will wrap up. What we can expect next week, we should still have Travion Smith. They may do closing arguments on Monday. So that case is getting close to wrapping up. We will have Justin Ross Harris's, it won't be next week, but this month, in the month of February, we'll have Justin Ross Harris's pretrial hearings coming up. Michelle Anderson is still going. We'll probably, I know they haven't been live streaming that consistently, but they'll probably live stream the closing arguments and then the verdict. Okay, thank you for joining us. Thank you. I'm just reading you guys in chat there. Thank you so much. We're hoping to do this every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, so I hope that you guys will join us. Thank you.